Hello, and welcome to another episode of Around the Table, where I am joined by House Party Protocol's Will,
What's up?
Turn Zero Gaming's Josh,
Hello.
and the wonderful creator of this new fan made format, Coffee.
Hello, hello.
So, if you have not already guessed it at this point, today we are going to be talking about the new auction
You're good.
draft format. Everything good?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, good.
Oh no, we
Sorry.
lost his face.
It'll come back. There you go. Sorry about that. I mean, the people out there need to see this beautiful mug to go along with this beautiful voice, right? And that is
Absolutely. No, you're good, dude.
Oh goodness.
totally off the rails already. Anytime I'm involved.
It's all good. It's what we love. So today we're talking about the new auction draft format that Coffee kind of got to come up with. All of us here were half of the initial test run draft league thing, whatever you want to kind of end up calling it, because Coffee was generous enough to extend an invitation to us, and we all got to both draft a roster of characters, play 3 games, and just kind of dive into this new fan made format, which is a really cool thing. So, Coffee, to start off, you definitely got the ball rolling and created the draft with the auction draft twist, I guess. What was your inspiration and what made you want to make it?
Well, starting off, I've played fantasy football forever, and I've been a big fan of the draft process of the fantasy football leagues that I've been in. And probably a month or two ago, we were talking on Discord, just random people talking about just ideas. And I said, man, if there was some sort of way you could like do a draft for all the characters, that'd be fun. And then I don't know, what was it, a couple weeks ago? Well, maybe it's been about a month ago, but maybe it was Thanksgiving break actually. So I had some time off as I'm a teacher, and was just kind of got tired of the monotony. X-Men and Brotherhood had been out, and I saw a lot of that, and then saw a lot of Criminal Syndicate, and I was kind of just seeing the same games over and over again in the leagues that we had. So I'm like, man, what if we could set something up where we could get some players playing some stuff that we don't normally see on the table? And then I kind of went back to that draft format that we had just, like I said, some people were talking about in Discord and just kind of kicking some ideas around. So I started putting some ideas on paper, or on a Google Doc, I should say. Then I started kind of hitting up some of the people in Discord, kind of floating the idea by them to see if there'd be any interest. And there was a surprisingly large amount of interest in it. So we kind of did a little three game preseason, and it's had a lot more success than I expected, for the popularity of it.
Yeah, so in addition to us doing kind of that initial first draft, it was obviously streamed and people were talking about it. And we then had one, I think within a week almost, the people who play MCP down in Australia had their own. And we've also since had one pop up in the UK. So
Yep.
I would say that's a definite success since nothing was even like really released and people were just all over it.
Yeah.
And it was a blast as somebody who got to participate in it. Uh, Will, Josh, talk to me. What did you guys think? First impression of the idea, all that stuff.
You go for it, Josh.
Okay. So I guess for me, I was kind of one of the perfect guinea pigs because I've never done fantasy football and I didn't know how an auction draft worked. So if you could explain it to an idiot like me, then you can explain it to anybody and have anybody do it. Um, but first impression of it was that it was a blast. The drafting section was absolutely hilarious and amazing, and I don't think you could ever replicate that experience. Particularly with the group of guys we had, it was just so ridiculous. Um, and I guess your mileage may vary based on what team you got, but I was really happy with my squad.
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler alert: Todd called me out on what I was originally planning in the draft, and successfully convinced people to hate draft away spiders. So I instead did Cyclops X-Men,
And slow played it.
Yeah, I slow played I thought, all right, I'm just gonna wait until everything is cheap because no one's got money, and buy whatever I want that's left. And it worked pretty well.
Yeah, and I guess that's something that you said kind of made me think. Somebody who is more auction draft oriented, would you like to explain what an auction draft is for anybody listening or watching that is not fully aware of how an auction draft typically works?
Well, in fantasy football formats, you normally have mainly two types. You have a snake draft, which is like you lay everybody out 1 through 10, and then you pick a player when it comes your turn, and then it starts back over in the second round, goes 10 down to 1. And that's the one a lot of people know, but my buddies and I have a auction draft, which is where you still have a draft order, or excuse me, it's more of a nomination order where you nominate a person and then the bidding begins, and you have 100 fictitious dollars that you get to bid with. And I thought that would be a lot of fun with MCP because everyone has different values of characters. Some people will swear up and down that MODOK's amazing, and I just thought, man, it would be so cool to see how high will some of these guys go, and how low will some of these characters that people don't like go, because everybody kind of has different value system of outside of their threat values, of course, of how they value their characters. So I thought it'd be cool to translate that into MCP and see how it turn out.
Heard that one?
And boy, did it.
Some people pay $16 for Toad.
Some people pay $16 for Toad. Somebody valued MODOK at 40% of their budget, which was $40. And then towards the end, some characters ended up being absolute bargains because everybody else had already spent all their money.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's usually how it goes.
Turns out it was the first time I'd ever done an auction draft as well. I've done plenty of fantasy football snake drafts, but this was the first, so it was a really fun experience. Will, sorry to have cut in there at first because just I myself didn't know, so I figured somebody else may not know. Tell me about first impressions, what you thought of the experience.
So I'm like Coffey, a fantasy football veteran, if you will. I've been playing for years, and auction is by far my favorite way to draft. And what makes it so fun is the player pool for football and for MCP. Your player pool is unlimited. If you want MODOK for $40, you can get MODOK for $40. You're gonna have to live with that choice, but it can happen. You know what I mean? So like nothing's off the table, which I really love that format. So I feel like for MCP, it worked really well. And like was mentioned earlier, the group that we had together was really fun. The entire draft was just a blast, and there was rumblings leaving the draft that I left with the best team, and I think I put that to bed. I'm just saying. It was.
I definitely agree. Getting out of the draft, you were probably the most feared person.
Little did y'all know that,
Well, hey, you got to play a team that you never played before.
To our
advantage.
It is, and it ended up being just a lot of fun. You know what I mean? Like I got pretty wrecked in a couple of games, especially that last one. But it overall was still a really enjoyable experience. And Nate, we've been doing podcasts together for a while, and I've bemoaned certain characters here and there, and I have a newfound respect for some of them. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of my takeaways is because you're forced to not play the teams that you're most comfortable with, because either you draft an affiliation you don't usually play, or maybe you have to get a character that is part of a different affiliation brought into your team. For me, Ronan was a surprising MVP of my unaffiliated team, just because at the end of the draft he was a $4 4-threat character that I was able to pick up, who did absolutely monstrous things in my first game, as Coffey can probably attest to.
Yeah, I've never seen 12 damage out of one swing before until that game.
Oh no,
that's impressive.
It was real good.
Yeah.
All right, so getting into some details, and Coffey talked about this a little bit. What we did, at least, is we all got together online, set up a little table where we had every model possible for us to draft on the table. We kind of grouped them into affiliations, and one at a time we would put up for auction a character. Somebody would nominate, and then an initial starting bid, and then we would go up by $1 increments, betting, and all this. So I was one of the early people to run out of money quickly because I quickly went after Corvus Glaive, followed by Valkyrie, which took about half of my budget for 2 characters. Everybody else here did something quite a bit different with their strategies. Josh, you want to talk about how you kind of played the draft?
Yeah. So I went into it thinking, okay, the only other person at this table I know that wants spiders is going to be Todd. So what
Haha,
I'm gonna
joke's on you, because I wanted him
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I didn't know that until later. So I thought, all right, well, I'm just going to pass up every good opportunity because you're going to get your Modocs and your Shuris and your Valkyries and your super obvious powerhouses out of the way first. There's a good chance spiders are going to just slide under the radar. And if I hold on to my money, I can outbid everyone on spiders. So my plan was to maybe pick up a couple of good key players like Cough Cough Toad for as cheap as possible, as contradictory as that sounds.
$16 is pretty cheap, I guess,
60
relatively.
Right. Well, I think I still had the most money at that point, and I was just going to outvalue everyone and just bully for characters I wanted at the end. But someone told everyone, so I ended up still using that strategy, but to get other things. So I got like Venom for I think $3 or $4, and Punisher for like $5, and those were probably the 2 best values I got.
Mm-hmm.
Venom was $7, but still good value.
Venom, yeah.
Yeah.
I got Wolverine and Cyclops for cheap, and then had a bid
Yeah.
war with someone for Beast.
You had a bid war with me for Beast because
You didn't want me to have him.
I wanted Beast. I wanted a throwing 3 for my Magneto team, and to keep him away from you.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense, because
Gotta play that
something you can
defense every
definitely
once in a
do in
while.
one of these drafts is try to keep away key characters. So, for example, GD Nerd, who does Roster Doctor, early on drafted Modoc for that said $40, and then we were trying to make sure to keep away key Cabal pieces from him. Granted, he's still got quite a few, unfortunately. But because he had spent so much money on the Modoc, we were able to kind of then punish him for that expensive play.
Yeah, he had to overpay for Red Skull and Mystique both that he landed.
Yep, which left him with some limited threat options when those threat totals came up, which was kind of fun to see.
Yep.
Someone in this chat right here, Josh, had plenty of money to keep him from getting Red Skull and still didn't do it. So I'm just saying, I'm just throwing it out there.
I got a lot of words about not hate drafting off people.
Well, you might have got stuck with them too, because that's another thing. So one thing I wanted to throw out there, I threw together a list of like all the threat of all the characters, and we took Winter Soldier out and made Winter Soldier available to everybody for 12, and that left us with 205 threat left total in the pool. So if you value everybody's $100 out, that factors out to be roughly, what was it, like 4 points per threat, or $4 per threat almost on average, maybe 3 something.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a baseline that you go with when you're looking at how much should this character be worth. So when you're grabbing Venom for $7, that's way undervalued. But when Modoc's going for $40, that's way overvalued. So that's what we're kind of looking at, and that's what kind of shifted the balance, I think, a little bit on the draft results.
Absolutely. And Coffey, you already told us a little bit doing Magneto and things. Tell us about the roster you ended up with.
Well, I was kind of running the auctioneer part, so I didn't get to really pay as much attention to everything going on as I would have liked in retrospect. And we, at the last minute, we threw together a TTS board that you actually had that I think was awesome. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was to kind of throw it together in a Discord channel. So I was running the spreadsheet and running the auction, and I wasn't really focusing on like what I wanted to come away with. It's really hard to go into these with a plan because someone can wreck your plan and then you're just left in a mad rush. So I kind of tried to get characters with best value. And I've played Magneto a few times. I felt at $19 for a 6-threat Magneto, that was a pretty good value. I think in comparison to the other leagues, I think it was pretty cheap. I also had Storm though, and but I just couldn't let Magneto go for 19, and he fell to me. Magneto pairing with Black Dwarf is pretty good. So then I was just going to fill it with throwers and try to get the rest of Brotherhood. But Toad went for an astronomical amount for a 2-threat, and then Mystique went really high. So I was really just left with Sabretooth. I got Hulk because I thought $12 for 6-threat was good, but then in retrospect, having Magneto and Hulk, they can't ever play together. So
I mean,
that
they
one
can.
they can, but it's just that was dead weight on my roster. I did get Taskmaster for a little high, but he was a good buy. I just looking back on it, I didn't really get a very good team comp that fits together well. But all my games were pretty close. So I mean,
And,
like I said,
and
it was
in
still a
your
lot of fun.
defense, I think very few of us actually managed to put teams together that fully functioned as we would like, except for Will.
Yeah.
Yeah, this whole functioning as you would like thing. So, yeah, I was actually so like I mentioned earlier with the auction thing, like I've been doing auctions for a long time, and I usually go into an auction with like a strategy of like these are my targets, this is how much I'm willing to pay for each position, as it relates to football or whatever, right? So with this, it was kind of like I didn't have that definite strategy, and now that we've done kind of like the preseason thing, I know now kind of what kind of strategy to maybe try to develop going forward. But with that said, I really wanted spiders, and I felt like that I was, because that's what I've been playing so much of lately. Like I was really comfortable with it. And so I wanted to try to get that. And so my goal was just kind of slow play, throw out characters. And like I really enjoy like the mind games of the nomination process. So when Josh ended up getting Toad for that $16, it was me nominating Toad and trying to get money off the board, for a character that I thought was going to be popular. And one of my thoughts going into the draft in general was that the 2-threat characters were going to be more valuable than some of the 4-threat characters because of the scarcity there. So so I was kind of like, well, let me get the ones out of the way that I don't necessarily plan on, and we'll go from there. So anyways, I don't remember how much I got Black Panther for, but I think Black Panther was my first, or Shuri was my first pick at I want to say 20 something dollars.
You got Shuri at 19.
19, right? So I got Shuri at 19, and I like Shuri in my Spiders team, so I was like, okay, cool, Shuri. And then I don't know how it all kind of shaped out otherwise, but like I ended up getting Black Panther. He wasn't going for hardly anything. I felt
cheap.
like
you got him for 15.
Yeah,
that's cheap.
I got a leader for 15 and a really great leader. I've played a lot with Black Panther. Like I kind of know the shtick with Black Panther also, and Shuri. But then as it started to shape up, it became a Wakanda team. I ended up with Okoye and Killmonger and Doc Ock. And the only thing that kind of like messed it up was that I didn't get another 3-threat character. So I had Captain Marvel and Peter Parker also. And I really liked the way it played, but I've never really outside of like when they first came out and just trying to play around and have some fun, I've never really used Wakanda. And I've never really like Wakanda waved. You know what I mean? Like shout out to Jacob on that specific strategy, and like it's really strong and the control elements are really good, but I've got that like spider mind going. So trying to play Wakanda like I do my spiders is a little different because they're kind of opposite in a weird way.
Yeah, pushes versus pulls, right?
Right. And so then, Killmonger is a character that I've had a hard time figuring out, if you will. Like I had a hard time getting him to work for me, I should say. Like I know he's like, this ultra assassin, like, oh, he takes everybody out. He's just so good. and he is good. He is good, but I've never I've never personally gotten like the high level Killmonger play. I've had it done against me in season 3 of the TTS. Like I kind of saw the Killmonger progression work a lot better. So
Mhm.
I tried to get that going more in this season. And my one in spirit win, if you will, of the 3 games I played came against Josh, and Killmonger functioned very well and should have taken out Vision. We just this whole rolling a billion dice and forgetting that I had a wild Pierce thing happened. So there you go. There you go.
I'll
But
forfeit that spiritual win to you.
yes.
Most definitely.
Or Zane cheated from
Yeah,
before the game even
that's
started.
right.
too.
Right
I
from the
did
jump.
nothing but cheat that entire game.
Yeah,
I
you
couldn't
started out
stop.
with a full threat up on the board,
Right. And
and
then you couldn't see half the board.
Yeah, I couldn't see half the terrain on the table.
It was great. It was great. But
Yeah.
all that to say, so I left the draft feeling pretty good, but also kind of out of my comfort zone in
Mhm.
terms of like how to go about playing. Just and there's some universal things in Marvel Crisis Protocol, and especially with Wakanda. But it took me a while to get into it, and then that last game just went out of control. It went out. Modoc just did exactly like the legend of Modoc that we have in Marvel Crisis Protocol right now was on full display in that matchup. But
Doesn't feel
you
good.
know, it was all the dice, all the death. It was great. And Mark was kind enough to be like, hey, do you want to just call it here? I'm like, nah, let's play it out. Let's do it. It was like a brisk 65 minutes.
There you go. All right, so one last thing I'll ask about the actual draft process itself. Was there any one thing that surprised you during the draft process?
Yeah, I mean, the Modoc going for an insane price for 40% of the budget, and then Mark still being able to get an affiliation out of it. Like that did surprise me because
Yeah,
I fully expected like that was going to just be an utter punishment for him, and so that was a big surprise for me.
fair enough. Josh, any surprises for you?
Um, I think that was also a surprise to me. Putting so much value into one character, but still being able to come out with what could potentially be a really solid team.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing that I thought was really cool was I felt like a lot that even with there was obviously some unbalanced teams between people, but I felt like the playing field was relatively even.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
like I think at the beginning, Sooners Criminal Syndicate was like the favorite, and he didn't win. Sploosh won, right?
I think
Technically.
Sploosh won. Yeah.
So I like the idea that because we had all these somewhat inefficient teams, the ones that were favored at the beginning seemed to not do as well, based on like the players playing them and the weird wonky teams playing against them and the optimization you could get.
Hmm.
So it definitely made it feel more balanced than you probably would think on the surface.
Yeah. Coffee, since you kind of had drawn everything up, did everything go according to what you had planned out, or was it just chaos?
It actually went a little better. I think
Hey.
my fear was that, and I've heard some other podcasts mention this, that like all the leaders need to go first. And my worry with that is if somebody gets a leader, then they're just gonna get their pieces, and they can overpay for their pieces because, like for example, Proxima. When you got Corvus, I'm like, that's bad because you're gonna get Proxima because nobody in their right mind is gonna spend a bunch for Proxima. But that's also one of the reasons I wanted to bring people like Todd into this. Is somebody's going to be like, I'm not going to let you have Proxima, and that's exactly what he did. He kind of played the guy that went in there and bid people up. GD Nerd did that a little bit too. That's kind of what I felt was needed in this league.
Hmm.
I think I've seen in some of the others where once a leader, somebody grabs a leader, then they kind of had no problem kind of filling out the rest of their team, and that was my fear. So it actually played out a little better. I worry that in future drafts that we might see that happen when leaders go. Then you're going to see people kind of get their affiliation characters and pay premium for it, but be okay with that once they nab their leader. So, like I said, I was a little surprised. I think it went better than anticipated. To
Yeah.
having everybody had a little bit more of a mess on their hands, which is what I like.
Todd
We
was
all,
really the unsung hero of that
He was.
draft.
Absolutely.
He was the hero we needed, but not the one we deserved.
and Todd actually was probably my most and Todd and just kind of his general attitude that I think for the best rubbed off on some of the other players was kind of that hate drafting of, oh man, I got Corvus. So Todd instantly was like, cool, I'm not going to let you have Proxima. I'll spend like however much money you're willing to risk on Proxima. Like he will spend that amount. Granted, he did it to his own demise and ended up with probably the jankiest roster of all of us.
Yeah.
But one
But
of
it
the
was
other
fun.
things, oh dude, it was an absolute blast. Him and GD Nerd going back and forth because once GD Nerd got so low, Todd just to make sure that he didn't even get to bid would be like, cool, how much money you got left? I bid that amount, which was a blast to
So
watch from
good.
the sideline. But one of the things that I really appreciated because I ended up with one of the, I think maybe 2 or 3 unaffiliated rosters. Coffee, you might be able to.
You were unaffiliated, I think.
I know
Sooner
Todd's
played-
jank was unaffiliated.
Todd was unaffiliated. GD Nerd played a couple unaffiliated. Sooner, I think, played me unaffiliated. I think that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that was it.
Was the very nice benefit of if you don't have a leadership ability or you're not able to run an affiliation, you still have a leadership ability. For our league, our test league, we ran it as you just get to give one character one power over the course of a round. Nothing nearly as powerful as something like Red Skull or Captain America's, or even really the Guardians of the Galaxies, but just enough to still keep a team pretty viable, even if they don't have the additional tactic cards and stuff like that, which uh, also I think really helped be able to make a unaffiliated team draftable despite the leaders going later in the round and stuff, which was really nice. So the last thing I want to talk about today is how I think we'd hit this at the perfect time as far as the number of characters, the number of affiliations out, and all that, because we actually ended up with a really well balanced draft. And I think the Australians and the people over in the UK have done even better than our own draft experience, whether they learned from our mistakes or maybe they just didn't have a Todd who was kind of disrupting the balance and all that kind of stuff. But I think we've definitely hit a wonderful spot for this kind of format, drafting with 8 people. Going forward, though, I do not think that this would be the same experience when we have, instead of 60 characters, 120 characters. I think things get a little bit messy. Nobody's going to really fight over certain characters because they'd be like, oh, well, if I can't get this one, I can get this one. Something like that going on. So with that, do you guys have any thoughts about what's a good way to maybe try to manage this format going forward?
Yeah, I think we hit it pretty good, honestly, like you say. But at the same time, I think that it won't be as difficult, I think, as you might think going forward. So you said, like 120 characters, right? Okay, so you can do it in a couple of different ways. I think one of that would be to expand a league. Like as the game expands, you can add more people to a league. Now, granted, that brings about its own problems, but at the same time, I think that could also be fun as well. The next thing that I would think you could want to do is to maybe start to limit the draft pool. So I know that AMG has released kind of their collector format, which limits the pool in a game. But I think that you could do that from a draft perspective too. You say, okay, core set and only these models over here are what we're going to go with. Or you can do kind of a little bit of a veto process, like each player gets to come to the table with one character that they're vetoing out. I think that there's ways you can do it that would still make it to where it's not such a where it's like, okay, well, if I don't get Valkyrie, well, then I can just get other 3-threat character over here that does similar things. Which I will say, this also credit to AMG for not making characters feel too samey.
Mhm.
Like we only have one Valkyrie right now. Like, yeah, there's characters that throw, there's characters that do flurry attacks, but there's only one Valkyrie. You know what I mean? So like, I think that kind of stuff will still come into play in a format like this going forward.
Yep. And there is indeed only one Valkyrie. It's why I paid like what, $22 for her?
It's more than I played for Black Panther. So there you go.
Yeah. Josh, what about you, man? Do you have any thoughts on the format going forward?
I think so talking about like characters becoming like too many characters. I think the two ways that I would think you could manage that would be like the collector format that recently came out.
Mhm.
How people can bring packs rather than people bring packs. Maybe you could have, I don't know exactly how you do it. It'd be some sort of management outside of outside of your play group, or maybe your play group would have to do it. But let's say there's 100 characters. You could do packs of however many characters, and each player would select one to be unpacked for the draft. So before the draft starts, everyone sits down and says, I want the Spiders pack to be in this draft. I want the Cabal pack to be in this draft. So on, so forth.
Yeah.
And get your pool that way. Or, I mean, you could just have the absolute Wild West and just have every character in the game and keep drafting until no one has money or everyone has 10 characters.
Mm-hmm.
Just everything possible. Push every option out of the middle of the table.
I mean, that is a thing.
That sounds great. Sounds great. I'm in.
I'm okay with that being like the worst idea ever because it just sounds hilarious.
Coffee, what about you, man?
I think it can grow a little bit. I think when you say, when you get up to 120 characters, yeah, there's going to have to be some modifications to it. I think for the regular season, we'll probably throw in the January releases and see what that does to it. I think you had 10 people on your roster, but you were the only one with a full 10. Merzane had 9. Some people had 6, but the average was probably 7 or 7 or 7 or 7.5, something like that. So a few more characters might help, because like, for example, when I played you, I had to play a threat down because I couldn't make 18 on my team. So I think a few more characters might even help us. When you get more than that, you mentioned expanding teams. Initially, I wanted to go with 10 teams in the league. And looking at that, we thought 8 would be a better number because then you'd be spliced. The rosters would be really thin. I also initially wanted to do everybody plays each other because I had the fantasy football mindset thinking that everybody's going to play each other. We'll play a full season. But then I quickly learned after 2 or 3 games, we kind of had some roster fatigue. It's like, yeah, this jank team was fun, but I don't want to play 7 weeks of this. 3 I think was perfect. So when you start expanding your league size, you get into have to play more games to get a overall winner that goes undefeated. So that you're going to run into as well. And I think everybody, when we kind of voted, said 3 was pretty good. 3 was a pretty good number of games to play. So,
yeah, and also once you add more people, the draft process itself takes longer,
Sure.
and it becomes more and more difficult to actually get to try to put this together.
Sure. Yeah, 8 was a great number. Another thing that I've heard people suggest is that you just, you take it, you random number generate, and you start just banning out characters until you get the right amount of threat. And we may find a threat number overall that's good. And then when you cross that threshold, you just be like, all right, we got to ban 15 threat before we even start drafting. And, just throw some characters out there that are not draftable. So there's ways that you can modify it.
I like that. That RNG thing, that sounds pretty good.
So my personal vote, I guess, if there is a vote on it, is to limit to a certain number of affiliations, just because we have, I think, a good number of leaders. For our draft, we got to do 12. She-Hulk would make 13. I don't think 13 would be an issue. But it also kind of, you're still getting characters within a lot of those. And so maybe if Cabal is brought, but then Criminal Syndicate isn't brought, you still get a bunch of those Cabal characters that have the crossover and stuff like that work out pretty well, I think. But uh, I'm definitely interested to continue to draft up little jank teams and play 3 games, have a fun time, in the same way that Magic the Gathering has a really fun draft format where, heavens, you don't want to play that deck for years and years or anything even close to that. Probably even a couple of weeks would be too much, but those 3 to 4 games is probably just the right number.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was great. Like, I should have probably played a little better, but at the same time, like it was just a good time, and I think that playing the jank teams and like Coffee when I played you, I mean, like it was that was a fun match. You know what I mean? And like it just kind of, it's like I was just committed to taking down Magneto, but it seemed like that wasn't going to happen. But
It was
neither
tough.
here nor there. But it was fun, and I think that this format is one that has legs, as especially for those of us that tend to get a lot of games in, and have been a part of the community for a while and stuff. And Coffee, Josh, you guys especially, I know y'all are all over the Discord. Like, I feel like that it's definitely like a nice uh palate cleanser, if you will,
Yeah.
for Crisis Protocol. Not that anything bad is going on in Crisis Protocol, but like, the here's my roster. I've worked on it. I've built it, and then I'm going up against somebody else's tuned roster. It's like I feel like that this kind of a thing is a really nice refreshment to what MCP is in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think you could honestly just have a day where you sit down with a bunch of people and literally just do the draft, laugh at what you got, and then do it again. I think the draft process itself was so fun that it was worth the entire experience. But I do agree with there is a little bit of roster fatigue. I like my roster, and it's a
Same.
roster I would actually play. But I know that some people can get a little tired of playing the same roster over and over again. So
Mhm.
I can appreciate a shorter season or a mid-season redraft.
And I
That
think
may be
that's
too much.
something. I think that's something we're going to look at when we make the season, and then just be like maybe keeping overall standings from season to season, and kind of keep everybody ranked on where we're at if we stick with the same group.
I'm gonna
for the
lock
long
down
period
that
of
8th ranking. I'm gonna lock it down. Mm.
You're going to get a win one of these days. Don't you worry.
One day.
I believe
Somebody's have to throw a game.
I'll do it for you, Will.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing, and because it was kind of the preseason trial draft and all that, in each of our 3 games, we played with different criteria. The criteria that was changing was one, we could either have a set crisis layout, mission objectives, where everybody who was playing in round 1 of the draft played the exact same crises. And then, or you could then later, we chose to pick the different missions ourselves in a traditional style where each player brings the 3, they roll off, all the normal stuff. Personally, I enjoyed being able to bring my own 3 and do the normal crisis selection. Will, what about you?
For me, it was 100% the predetermined crisis. I definitely liked that the best, just because at that point you can go into it with a little bit of like, all right, this jank I'm about to put on the table, which okay, it didn't happen. I didn't happen to have jank per se, but this unfamiliar thing I'm about to put on the table, I can at least have some predictability in what I need to do based on that, instead of just a straight, well, you might get demons and you might get the senators, and
Mhm.
good luck. Which, don't get me wrong, like I love that aspect of MCP, not knowing and
Mhm.
building a roster around that. But when you've got this like kind of crazy roster situation, I definitely liked the predetermined crisis. And then I also liked the thing we did where we banned the band.
Wait,
And
that's the next question. You're going. No, stop. Too far. Josh, what about
nothing else
you
happened, guys.
on the crisis selection decision?
crisis. I lean more towards having a little bit more control over what you got. Uh, because everything's so jank, I'm a little scared of getting a team that doesn't work on a particular scenario combination, and then you could at that point you could have someone just not have something, completely incompetent at that scenario, and you just have a bad time. Not necessarily like you're not going to win, but you're not going to have a good time. And I think that it can be avoided with being able to have your own. But I do agree. I liked playing on scenario combinations. I typically don't, or at least the idea of it. Um, I'm really scared of people having a bad time, and that can put a really bad taste in your mouth if you have that one game where your one group of guys just doesn't do it, and there was nothing you could do about it.
Yeah.
Maybe I mean, I'm not creative enough to come up with a solution to that, to be honest, but that's why I lean more towards the let people bring it side.
Yeah, and part of that was also possibly trying to have, like AMG did with their draft or collector format, where they just said, cool, no matter what, you're playing at 17 threats, so plan for that. Whereas we were able to each week play by at least one of the two crises, whether it was a pre-selected one or not. And Coffee, I'd love your input. And then you also got some surveys that polled other people who've experienced the draft at this point. I'm also kind of curious what the overall, I guess, view is from people who've tried it.
Well, with mine, I wanted as much variance and as much like, let's see something new. I felt like we saw a lot of the same. I was even starting to see the same rosters when I was playing. I was starting to see the same crisis being played repeatedly. So I kind of wanted to get some stuff on the board that we haven't seen. So I was a big advocate for the random pre-selected crisis, and I tried to do it with the rule in there that if I draw a B scenario for a secure, then the extract can't be B. If I draw a B, then I'll draw another one, because I don't want that will really lopside it to if someone struggles with B and you have two Bs on the board, then they're going to really have a negative play experience. So
Too many bees in the kitchen.
exactly. So didn't want that. So I had that kind of in there. I love the pre-selected crisis personally. It just got some crisis out there that you don't see very often. And they weren't wombo combos. You had some stuff on there that it's like, I can't just play. You had to think with an open mind when you tried to come up with a strategy before the game. And that's another thing. I think if you looked at all the guys we had in our league, you probably couldn't count how many games total everybody's played. So I think everybody could take just about any roster and say, I can come up with some kind of strategy for this,
Yeah.
just because there was enough experience in the league to kind of play on the fly. So that's another thing that I think if you've got a league full of new players, there could be some negative play experience in there if you have a bad combination. I was worried when we got I think the first week was the scroll, and it tilted the map really hard left or right. I think a lot of them, but they were still close. I think, except for Will's game. I think. No, that was close. That was
Ours
close.
was our game was brutally close.
Our game was down to a die roll, literally.
Yeah, and so was mine and Nate's. Like I can't remember whose was.
It was Hammers, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was hammers and
Hammers and scrolls, wasn't it?
Hammers and scrolls.
Hammers
No.
That's how
can't do that.
Roland enrolled, like what?
It was
12?
meteors and scrolls.
Meteors and
No, it was
Yeah,
meteors
that's
and
it.
hammers. Meteors
Yeah.
and hammers.
Goodness.
It was Sploosh's game that wasn't Sploosh and GD that wasn't close, but that was just because I think Sploosh popped off early, and but
Thor can do that.
As splooshes want to do.
I
Oh,
think
wow.
it was miles into like his hella or something. But anyway, but like I said, I think it went well pre-selected. And then the voting, I got 11 responses back across the EU and Australia and us. And a little over half, probably 6, said they like the normal crisis selection. 3 people said they like pre-selected, and then 2 people said no preference. So, it wasn't overwhelming either way. I think the more competitive people will probably like the the normal crisis selection, just because there is some advantage there of choosing your crisis.
Mhm.
But I for this league, I wanted to kind of even the playing field as much. And initially, like I said, I thought we might all play each other across 7 games, and I thought we might be able to see every crisis on the board before the end of the season. Because
Yeah.
when you play one, you throw it away, and it's out of the drawings for the next week. So that was my initial thoughts, but I still like it even in a 3-game series. Randomizing it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you nailed it on the head where depending on what kind of a draft experience, if you're wanting everybody to just play some fun jank and do whatever they can, because my last game I ended up having Ant-Man, Wasp, Valkyrie, Hawkeye with Corvus, and it was just like, man, if I had Captain America, I would have been set. But it was still an absolute blast. And so then if you're trying to if you're being a little bit more formulaic, being able to select your own definitely has its advantages and stuff. So I think it comes down to your play group and what you're looking for there. And this next question, I don't think
Ooh.
necessarily comes down to play
Can I
group.
get one more in? Can I get one more in on that?
You can get one
That's
more in.
one more
I
in.
was joking in my comment, Nate. Dang.
Have you who here played in the or paid attention to the Beta Splendens League? I don't think I'm pronouncing that right.
I got a slight finger on the pulse because one of our listeners was in it and talked a lot about it. G-Gypt or Alexa White talked a lot about it.
So one of the things I liked about it was it kind of bridges the gap between the two sides. What they would do is each week had a theme, so like play wide, and it would be they would give you the secures and the extracts that you would get, but you would draft them like normal at the beginning of the game. So you'd get 3 secures, 3 extracts that you both got, and you made the scenario that way. That might be something too. I thought that was really interesting because it forced different modes of play. So you kind of get that how flexible can you be with this roster you've built kind of thing.
Yeah, so you're drafting like one game you're forced to play on an E objective where it's either the demons or Gamma, and you kind of force that clumped up scenario versus possibly Extremis consoles and Spider Portals and Black Order for one of the other weeks. That actually sounds like a really cool idea to stress test the different levels of jank people bring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that might be a good way to give some people a little bit more control. So if they're like, I absolutely cannot play Gamma, then they
But I can do demons.
But I can do demons, or I can do whatever the third one is for the narrow or tall or whatever people call it.
Yeah.
Straight down Main Street.
Straight down Main Street's a good one. I think that's a good compromise if that's something that y'all would. Of course, it's a little bit more upkeep on the
pre-selected, but still have pre-selected options. You mean
pre-selected options, but you still get that. You still get that priority roll matters kind of thing at the beginning of the game too.
Okay.
And a little bit of that crisis selection. I felt like that was probably my most positive part of that league was that crisis selection for a casual league was great.
And you know what works really well? If we're doing it over 3 rounds, there's exactly 9 crises of the secure and extract right now.
Boom.
So you could set it up at the beginning of the season. Done. I like it.
Done and done.
That really appeals to me. Well done.
Hashtag math.
Get your games in before the next crisis comes out then.
Yeah.
Yep. You got a month.
It's gonna be February. We're good.
Cool. So my follow-up question, and Will maybe jump the gun just a little bit, is we also one of the other things that we played with restricted and then outright banning and stuff was one from the beginning we just canceled out cards like Hired Muscle and Pentagrams from Doctor Strange and the Defenders because they are extremely powerful, possibly to the point of overwhelming, especially in a league scenario where the answers to those questions certainly just probably do not exist on the other side of the table and could definitely create an overwhelmingly negative play experience. The other thing we did, in addition to outright banning those for the entirety of the league, was then alternating weeks where the banned and restricted list were all banned, and you would just play with whatever other 8 crisis or tactic cards that you could come up with. And the other weeks, we did the normal thing, playing with the normal banned and restricted lists. Josh, which between those two did you prefer?
I'm a little torn. So if you ever ask me, I am definitely pro anti hired muscle.
Yeah.
You're pro anti-hired. What?
Yeah, absolutely. If you were to ask me, should we put anti-hired muscle on the ban list, I would tell you yes. So not having a league where we don't have to worry about that was totally great with me.
Mhm.
And not seeing as many med packs and field dressings and stuff, and having it feel like brawling mattered a little bit more, was definitely something that appealed to me. But it hurt my heart to not be able to put Doom Prophecy in on those weeks,
Mhm.
because it's one of my favorite cards, and one of the ones that, if you were to ask me, I am anti-pro limiting Doom Prophecy. I'd rather it come off that list.
You're pro anti
Yeah, and
hired muscle,
anti-pro.
and you're anti pro.
Yeah, exactly.
You're killing me,
Uh,
Smalls.
So I feel like a more curated list might be a good compromise, depending on the current meta. Like if the certain problems we had do get banned, obviously you don't have to do that,
Mhm.
and you can just go with the current ban restricted list. But if there is something that I feel like that's kind of a play group kind of thing. Like if you don't want to see this as a group, just ban it. Personally, I would say ban those things. Keep the restricted list safe. Keep it good. Keep it pure. Because I want
Mhm.
my Dune prophecies.
Coffee,
More
what
th-
about you?
Well, back to what I wanted new things on the board. I wanted new characters. I wanted to see some stuff we hadn't seen just to break the monotony. So I wanted everything banned, just to exactly what I wanted to happen. I saw some tactics cards that I'm like, what the heck does that do? And we had to I learned some things. I learned how to play some scenarios that I hadn't played in a while.
Mhm.
I learned what Winter Soldier did. I learned some tactics cards. So I like the restrictions of making people. We've got how many tactics cards in the game, and we see the same, probably 10 every game we play. So by banning a good chunk of those out, saw a lot of new stuff.
That's fair. Will, what about you?
So, as I was alluding to earlier,
Back on
I,
subject.
yeah, I really liked that because of specifically what Coffee said, because we've you know the word meta gets thrown around so much. And like I feel like that there's nothing that's pure meta in this game from a model perspective, but tactics cards wise, there's a restricted list now, so that goes to show that certain things are meta.
Mhm.
And so I liked being able to explore some of the tactics cards more. And for instance, in mine and Josh's match, I played Vibranium Shielding, and it straight saved me. And I've never played that card ever. Even when I did play Wakanda back when they first came out, like it was a card I never put on the board, but it's good. I mean, you give everybody on the team that was within range 5 of Shuri. I mean, well, like you have to however much power you spend, whatever.
Yeah.
But they get to reduce damage by 1 to a minimum of 1, and like I've saved some characters because of that. So stuff like that I think is fun, and that card would have been a candidate for being bumped out for a med pack or a field dressing or something. So I liked being able to kind of look through the tactics cards in a new way. Like when I was going through just trying to pick out my 8, I was able to look through and be like, oh, this sounds like it might be fun. Oh, well, if I run into someone with stealth, maybe marked for death sounds really cool now because I'm not limited. Like, oh, I gotta have med pack, I gotta have field, I gotta have Doom Prophecy, like some people. Um, you know.
Look, I ban all heal cards, unban all Dune Prophecy cards.
all Doom Prophecy all the
All
time.
the Dune Prophecies. I
Yeah.
love that card.
But
Well,
I mean, it was a good. I think it was just a really good way to keep things fresh, and I think that ultimately, and I don't want to speak for Coffey and I don't want to speak for everyone in the league, but ultimately, I think that was the intent, was to keep it fresh and to try new things. And I also think that from my perspective, went over well. Is everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves and discussing it and stuff like that.
Well, and fun fact, of the survey results I got, I have 6 from the US, I got 4 Europeans and 1 Australian voted. And all the US people voted to ban hired muscles or portals. And then 4 of the 6 US voted they wanted restricted cards as well. All the EU and Australians said normal rules on that. Like it's an interesting view. And I don't think they did any bans in their leagues, but for us, where we banned our stuff, we were all for banning things, and then them that did normal, they were all for normal. So that's interesting, at least.
I was about to say I don't remember how I responded, but personally, I have of the mind of if you're wanting to ban all the restricted cards, maybe along the lines of Josh, but for a different reason, maybe bringing in a couple of those restricted cards just into the normal fold, because I, for one, got to play against Thor on a map where there were 3 size 3 terrain pieces and 3 size 4 terrain pieces. And Brace for Impact would have been
It's the only way you're going to survive that.
nice, to say the least.
I think everybody could use Brace at some point. I know you threw my big boy into
Black
Magneto.
Dwarf into Magneto a couple of times.
And then I had Magneto throwing everything. So Brace was probably the most missed, I think, of all the cards, at least in the games I saw.
Yeah, so I think
sure.
I think there maybe should be some allowances or figuring out of maybe either keeping the normal banned and restricted list and just playing it as normal, or maybe bringing a couple of those restricted cards that you would ban otherwise just into the normal fold, for the sake of being able to go up against certain teams and standing a chance to survive. But
one thing that I thought was interesting is we were just the nature of how we were doing it, because we were testing, was being able to change your tactics between weeks, so you could see your opponent and cater a tactic, so you could get those silver bullets. That could also be a way to encourage diversity of tactics, because you're not bringing your 8 generalist cards that are good for everything. You can say, oh, well, like Will said, that guy's bringing a stealth guy, and I want to bring Marked for Death for that. So now you're not stuck with Marked for Death in every game, but you can go, that guy brought 2 stealths, Marked for Death. That guy brought this. I'm going to bring this. That guy, like Doctor Strange, I'm going to bring Grievous Wounds. Stuff like that. That could be a good way to encourage diversity. I would still say you have to play with the ban restricted list some, but that would be a good way to get some of those really weird cards injected into the game too, I think.
Another fun look on it.
I'm all about those on the fly ideas, man.
Crushing it.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you all for joining me today. Will, you want to shout out what you're doing in the community?
Oh yeah, so check out House Party Protocol podcast on all the podcast places, I think. And we do a regular show where we kind of do some tactics discussion and some character breakdowns and stuff like that. More or less beginner friendly. We try to keep it, to where we explain everything as it comes up, because I think that's a good thing. And yeah, so check us out over there. And then me and you, Nate, we have the after party on the same feed as House Party Protocol, and we go and take a look back at characters that have been out for a while and kind of where they started and where they are now, and if they've gotten better or worse or stayed the same.
Yep, just about.
Yeah.
Josh, what about you, man? What have you been doing?
I occasionally appear on Turn Zero's podcast, and I have my own little podcast that I host with my friend Kenny G called Advanced R&D, where we make people build jank. Which is why one of the reasons I love this format so much, because I like forcing people to play jank and put Dune Prophecy in their list. Other than that, I'm on the Discord constantly, or not as much lately because of holidays, but when I have more time, I'm constantly on the Discord talking, so you can always find me on there. And I'm also going to be Central's Dark Illuminati guy. So if you have questions for league stuff, you can message me so I can message someone who knows more and then tell you.
Dun dun dun.
Just spam
That's
them.
the real
Send them all
secret.
the
It's just,
messages.
we just
Yeah.
constantly ask each other the same questions over and over again. That's really what's going to happen.
Right. Which Dark Illuminati character are you though? Like which one?
God, I don't know.
All
See,
right, we'll think on that.
everyone asks me, am I Rocket or Howard in our at our podcast, and it's Rocket. But there's no Rocket in the Dark Illuminati, so I don't know which
Right.
one.
Certainly hope not. That'd be terrifying.
Oh my
The
God.
weapons he can build.
We're just gonna nuke them, right?
Coffee, what about you, man? Anything you want to shout out?
Just be ready for the next draft. I think actually that's our next thing for us to talk about is pin a date on when we're going to start our first regular season, and I'm sure it will be broadcast by many. And
Could be a bloodbath.
it's fun to watch. And now that we've got a preseason under our belt, we all kind of have some strategy and know what we're doing. I hope, except for maybe Will. I don't know.
I mean, I like to shoot from the hip. I should play Guardians because I'm just gonna wing it.
There you go.
All righty, guys. Thank you all again for joining me for this, and to the viewers, thank you for watching / listening to this. It's been a fun discussion. The entire process has been a lot of fun. So, if you want to try this yourself, I will have a link down in the description to either a Google Doc or something that you can download that goes through the process so that you can hold your own draft, whether that be online and then played out over weeks like we've been doing, or if you're in a part of the world where you're able to actually gather together with a total of 8 people and do this in person and just spend a day to draft for a couple hours and then play 3 quick games, because
The dream.
really these games are not ones that are going to last 4 to 5 hours or anything crazy. So
Sometimes they're quite brisk.
they can be quick and brutal.
Yeah.
So with that, it's something I would highly recommend doing if you haven't tried out any of the other new formats. This one is also totally worth giving a shot. And with that, thank you all for watching, and until next time, keep on gaming.